Tonight, we visit Camp Crystal Lake and the legend of Jason Voorhees. With a closer look at the Friday the 13th franchise, we talk to the creator and director of the original film, Sean Cunningham. We explore the Friday the 13th video game and take a peek at one of the hottest Jason collectibles around. All this and more on Famous Monsters TV. Welcome to Famous Monsters TV, a show that takes you behind the scenes of the hottest in horror, sci-fi, fantasy, and pop culture around, bringing you the exclusive interviews, movie reviews, and an inside look at all of the hottest toys, comics, and art. I'm Phil Kim, publisher of Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. FM has always long been known for classic characters such as Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Mummy. But tonight, we're going to take a closer look at a more contemporary monster, Jason Voorhees, the iconic movie maniac that has been terrifying moviegoers for decades. In 1980, Friday the 13th introduced audiences to a new kind of terror, shocking, visceral, and graphic. Now, with 12 films to date, there is no doubt that Friday the 13th is one of the most successful horror franchises of all time. We had a chance to sit down with the creator and director of the very first Friday the 13th, Sean Cunningham. And boy, did he share with us all the gory details of how it all got started.
Do you remember like the very first seed of idea that eventually became Friday the 13th?
Steve Miner and I and a lot of the same people got together and decided to make a movie about soccer. And we thought that this was really going to be really special, and that was going to be our key, more or less, to the big time, as it were. And when we finished the film, we were having terrible trouble with the names. It was called Manny's Orphans at first. We started making lists of titles and names after names, and while we were going down there, I just scribbled down Friday the 13th. You know, God damn it, if I had a film called Friday the 13th, I know how to sell that. What am I going to do with this kid's soccer movie? Basically, that's what happened is we started kicking around ideas back and forth. And finally, I think we turned a corner when one day Victor said, wait a second, what if it takes place in a summer camp before it opens? And it was like, oh yes. It really, light bulbs went on.
So the title just came first and everything sort of grew out of that.
In that particular case, yes, it did.
How did you end up casting the film? Betsy Palmer, for example.
Yeah, Betsy, well, now Betsy Palmer was very famous at the time, but she was famous as a morning TV host, like Meredith Vieira, or one of these nice people that you could depend on. And if you ever met her, she was a very, very nice person. So our feeling was that if she knocked on the door and, oh, it's Betsy Palmer, the audience would say, oh, well, there's nothing to worry about there. And then all of a sudden,
then of course you had
very quickly.
The twist writes itself in that case, almost.
Yeah.
Of course, we all know that the mother ends up being the culprit. Did you always have an intention to sort of bring Jason into it, or was Jason just sort of something that happened completely out of your control? Like all of a sudden, Jason became the thing.
Victor had come up with the notion of a backstory, what motivated the mother, and it was the drowning of her young child. Okay. Now, we're going along trying to make the movie, and my investors said, I'd really like to get some sort of jump at the end. And, can you get me a jump at the end? Wouldn't that be great? And I said, yeah, it'd be great. I have to figure out what it would be, but I don't know. So cut to about 2 or 3 days later, and I get a call about, all right, what if she's on the lake, and then out of the lake comes this mongoloid creature and grabs her and pulls her under? I knew for sure that we could startle the audience, but we had no idea it was going to work as spectacularly well as it did. But that's a function of a whole bunch of other things coming together at the right time.
Were you approached for the sequel, or did somebody else? Was that something that
No, I did not want to do the sequel, but the people that had worked on it with me, it became an opportunity, and my friend Steve Miner got to direct the second one, and finally the third one.
And after the years you stepped away, what was it that made you come back with Jason Goes to Hell?
Wes had started the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and then he had pulled away. He didn't want to keep doing that over and over again. And both of the series, had developed sort of their own momentum, but they were just slowing down and they were very predictable. Mm-hmm. And as a producer, I said, Freddy versus Jason. God, it's like, that sounds like a grudge match in Las Vegas. I thought that would really be a good thing to sell, and it could invigorate the franchises. And luckily for me, Paramount was willing to let the franchise go. They were just grinding them out, but they just didn't like the series. And so I was able to take that and go to New Line, where they had the Freddy stuff, and pitch them just the way I did to you. And they said, sounds great, let's do it. And there started almost 10 years of development, of trying to figure out how to take two iconic negative forces and make a movie that's fun to see. But in the meantime, we had to do something, and we needed to get, let's make another Friday the 13th while we're waiting and developing this other thing. And the New Line said, all right. And that's how we got to Friday the 13th Part 9. And pretty much a replay a few years later, where I still wanted to get Freddy versus Jason, and New Line just didn't want to do what I wanted to do at the time, and it became, all right, but we're going to have to do something. And we're sitting around the office saying, what the hell are we going to do? And it became pretty simple. How about Jason in space? Okay. So Jason went to space. And that's what he was doing while he was getting ready in training for Freddy versus Jason.
And of course, recently there have been remakes of both Friday the 13th and Last House on the Left. What gave you the idea that it was the right time finally for a remake of both of those?
When Friday the 13th got to the point where we had done Freddy versus Jason, then the question becomes, what do you do next? And you're going to bring in Michael Myers, you're going to bring in Pinhead, or what are we going to do? And we really didn't see a way to make it grow like wrestling might. And Platinum Dunes, Michael Bay and his company, had an idea for remaking the classics, and wouldn't we like to remake Friday the 13th? And I said, sure. And because this put a whole new spin, a whole new life on it.
And fans are definitely going to want to know, is there any film with Jason in the future?
Most people know that we were going to go ahead with the 13th of the Friday the 13th theatrical installment. And some problems came up with the rights, and whether or not the rights would be available in the future, and if so, who would they be held by? Would they revert back to Victor Miller, the original writer, or would they stay with us and Paramount and Warner Brothers and New Line and other people who had worked on it? It's not an unusual situation. There has to be a solution. I mean, there just has to be a solution. And so I'm very optimistic. And I would say that, well, we're going to make another theatrical movie first chance we get.
Everyone is waiting for Jason's return to the big screen. But while you're waiting, you can check out Sean's new film, The Nurse with the Purple Hair. It's a documentary about end-of-life care, centering on a hospice nurse named Michelle Lasota. If you're interested in watching this warm and inspiring film, go to thenursewiththepurplehair.com. Stay tuned when we come back, Monster Kids. We're going to show you how you can play Jason in the new Friday the 13th video game. Welcome back to FMTV. I know you've watched all of his movies. I also know that you've dressed up like him in Halloween. And now, you can actually be Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th, The Game. And we're not talking about that 8-bit game from Nintendo. It's a third-person horror survival game that pays tribute to all of the Friday the 13th films. We met up with two key players who told us what it was like to bring Jason Voorhees back to life in a video game.
How does Jason see? What does he hear? How does he get around the map? What's it like to be Jason Voorhees?
What made you decide on Friday the 13th?
The first Friday the 13th film I saw was Friday the 13th Part 3 when he gets the mask. And I was like 9 years old. And the blending of that hockey mask and the wooded setting with this powerful killer, it just stuck with me. And I think it stuck with everyone. And there's a reason that he continued on. So it was very real. Everyone's been camping, right? Everyone's been in the woods, alone at night on like a Boy Scout trip or camping, and you hear things, and so it's very relatable. So I think that's what helped get me attached.
Damn it! Just die!
For me, just the fact that you kind of were rooting for Jason the whole time in all the movies. Like, I grew up on all the films. Personally, like Part 6 is my favorite. Just realizing that this is the perfect setting to approach asymmetrical gameplay through the lens of horror, specifically Friday the 13th.
What aspects of the movies did you prioritize? Like this, we have to get this element in the game. Besides Jason, of course.
Obviously the Jasons. You know, we had to get all the Jasons that we could in the game, and we had to pay attention to painstaking details. So we had to get every mask right, every piece of clothing, and those are very hard things to do. But we brought in famous locations like Higgins Haven and Packanack Lodge. You know, those structures aren't available anymore. They're torn down or burnt down, and those blueprints don't even exist. So we spent a lot of time getting those locations right. But at its core, the game starts when Jason shows up. So we asked ourselves, what do they do in the movies when Jason shows up? And what would you do in real life? We wanted players to instantly spawn in, know that Jason's there, and use their intuition. Oh, I gotta find a weapon. Well, we put a weapon in the game. Oh, I gotta call the cops. We put a phone line in the game, but it's broken. Oh, we should get a car and escape. So we tried to go down the list of everything your mind would actually jump to first, and that's how we built our gameplay, essentially.
The other thing that was really important from the films, like inside of games, people kind of undervalue audio feedback and music and sound effects, but especially in horror films, like they're like 50% of the movie. And in our game, it's like 70% of the experience. Like the music cues are kind of warning you subtly that Jason's there, but they also harken back and they make you remember watching the films and being scared. So it kind of all harmoniously kind of weaves together. And so audio is actually something that people don't expect to be a driving force of the game, but it actually is.
It's a major part of gameplay, our audio is, so.
Friday the 13th aside, if there was no restrictions and this was fully taken care of, you know, what other franchises would you want to do the same thing with?
It's not one that most people would pick, but I see a lot of gameplay potential and a lot of fun in it, and I'm also scared of clowns. So Killer Clowns from Outer Space, to me, would be like a dream game.
A little known secret, a long time ago when we were designing, coming up with the slasher idea, killer versus normal people, the original idea was actually a clown game, trapped in a carnival, and you had to escape with your friends. It never got any farther than paper, but that eventually evolved into, wait, we can just do a Friday 13th tribute instead. But at one point, we were considering a clown game, and it wasn't going to be Killer Clowns because we didn't want to get the license on it because we were a small company. But at one point, that was a basis of an idea. I mean, it's kind of stuck with us. So I've said this a million times, but my favorite horror franchise is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Mm-hmm. So the day I saw it, I'll never forget. I can tell you what I was wearing. I was like 12 years old.
Now, as you're thinking of DLCs and additions in the future, will we be able to ever see maybe other franchise horror characters coming into this world you've already created?
A really good idea, but this is a Friday 13th game, and we do have that. It's a privilege, it's not a burden, but staying true to that formula and that franchise. Along with other horror characters comes other legal battles and other rights holders. So a lot of people always bring up, man, it'd be really cool if we had a fighting game that was nothing but horror characters. The problem is you have to go out and get the license for each one of those horror characters, and pay those people for the license. And then there's like a billion contracts, a billion companies going in circles because
So
they're not
many
all
lawyers.
owned by the same. So really, I think that's what stopped us from having other horror characters join licensed products like this. Mortal Kombat did a couple where they were able to get Leatherface and Jason and Xenomorph. But those are 3.
I think even Mortal Kombat, I think they only included like 1 in a game.
Yeah, and they were DLC characters that you paid for so that revenue could go to rights holders. Each one would come with a contract, so we're already a small company, so for us to navigate that world would be insane. So, but it's a good idea. A lot of people want it. Once a week we get that question online. Hey, is there going to be Michael Myers DLC? Hey, is there Freddy? Put Freddy in your game, because they think Freddy versus Jason was a Friday 13th film. It was actually a Freddy film. That's why it starts with Freddy versus Jason. So
I mean, the good thing about it is you got people excited.
No, I did. That's good. The conversation is happening. So that means we're doing our job. And
Maybe they'll be open to it down the road. We don't know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if they can figure out with contracts and lawyers how we can make this work.
Yeah.
Not saying we're not open to it.
Hopefully, one thing at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Exactly.
Hey, be on the lookout for downloadable content and other exciting extras at f13game.com. Coming up next, as we continue exploring everything Friday the 13th, we'll take a peek at the ultimate Jason collectible. And later, our FM flashback takes us to Dallas, Texas, where we look back at our Famous Monsters convention. Welcome back. If you're a diehard fan or a hardcore collector, you are definitely going to want to check out this book. Crystal Lake Memories, the complete history of Friday the 13th, or the documentary inspired by the book, combining rare and never before seen photographs, film clips, and outtakes. It's all there, but if you want to see something really special, check out Sideshow Collectibles, a company dedicated to connecting people with their favorite characters and icons from film, TV, comics, and pop culture. Sideshow offers an incredible 6th scale and a premium format figure. Curious on what went into making Jason Voorhees and why a company would turn to horror? Check this out.
You don't have to be told when you're a little kid that there's something under your bed or there's something in the closet. You know with a fact that there is something in the dark. No one teaches that to you.
I think people gravitate towards the horror genre, horror films, because a lot of times it feels real. So I think there's something tangible about it that really triggers some key emotions in us that makes us feel really human.
The horror film is sort of a rite of passage. When you're a kid, like, oh, did you see Friday the 13th? You hear about it from your older cousins or your older brothers or sisters, and it creates this need in you to see it, to sort of test yourself to see if you can get through that fear.
Sideshow cut its teeth on horror, Universal Monsters. That's where we started. We've learned a lot throughout the years with paint techniques and production techniques where let's go back, let's revisit these characters, and let's start with some of the modern horror characters that we had done before.
Jason Voorhees would ruin you if you met him in public, and you'd be dead.
That mask is now iconic with slasher horror and not a sport, which is insane.
Jason drowned because, teenagers are off having sex and not doing their job being camp counselors, and, I mean, come on, who's the villain here?
We're not trying to take a still from the movie. We're not trying to filter down to one specific time in the movie. It's more representing the character itself.
We're finding the best angle, taking that and putting our own style into it. We can't wait to get it out there. It's really exciting.
The things that we fear, we really kind of seek to understand. And I think that that's kind of a theme that radiates through the entire platform of stuff we're putting forth.
Sideshow does amazing work, and if you want one of these figures, go to sideshowtoy.com. When we come back, Our FM flashback takes us back to our famous Monsters Dallas convention. You know, here at Famous Monsters, we love bringing our fans experiences that move well beyond the pages of our magazine. That's why we celebrate everything horror, sci-fi, and fantasy through conventions, giving fans a chance to meet their favorite stars, sit in on informative panels, and shop for the best collectibles around. If you weren't there, here's what you missed. Famous Monsters Convention Dallas was a beast of a show that brought the pages of FM to life. Monster Kids were able to meet and mingle with legendary actors and creators that birthed their fandom, and even the new upcoming filmmakers that are shaping the future of genre storytelling. From undying hobbies like Dungeons & Dragons tournaments and Lego building, to the second annual Silver Screen Fest and the special rare US screening of Shin Godzilla, I think that massive line shows why he's the king of monsters. FM also joined in on the VR boom that is sweeping the nation with our friends from Face Space, bringing a VR game where you got to be a wizard or a warrior fighting off demons, goblins, and ghouls. Even the lone gunman in Sean Cunningham had a few swings at it. It was a horror-filled show that wouldn't have been possible without the wonderful staff, volunteers, vendors, guests, and of course our attendees. Can't wait to do it again this October in San Jose at our Famous Monsters Halloween Bash. That is all the time we have for tonight. But if you want to check us out for our conventions or any other FM news, please go to famousmonsters.com. See you next week.